Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. Well, we've been focused a lot on stuff going on in Ukraine, the potential for some type of meltdown or explosion at the power plant, and several other things. But, while we're focused on that, other stuff's going on. And that's exactly what I want to talk about today. Going back to a subject we've talked about repeatedly on this channel, and that's the de-dollarization, because it is happening whether you like it or want to admit it or not. There are forces on this planet that are trying to create a big alternative to the US dollar, which is probably going to put the US dollar in a more rapid pace of becoming a digital currency versus the fiat paper currency that it is now. Before I get started in that, I don't do this hardly ever, only a couple other times since I've had this channel, but it is something that I feel is very important. So if you can just give me a couple of minutes of your time, I'll try to run through this. A very close friend of my wife and I, her daughter has been dealing with cancer for about a year now, really struggling with it. And fortunately, she's been able to overcome some of the initial threat of the cancer, but because of that, it has left her with needing other surgeries, a gallbladder surgery, and a few other things. And her insurance has run out. Many of you have had family or maybe even personally experienced this, where you've had some major medical problem in your life, and insurance does great until a certain point, and then it's done. And so she's really struggling. She's a young lady, a mother, and she is really struggling with this, needing this other treatments and having no funds and no insurance for it. We pay into these insurance companies thinking and hoping that they're just going to take care of things, and then when big stuff like this happens, it doesn't work out. So she has a GoFundMe page, and if you feel led, if you're able to, if you could, potentially give, pray about it, and see if it's something that you feel led to give to. There is a link in the description below. We know this family personally, so I know that it's not any kind of a scam or anything like that. I can tell you they're good people, and they're just, it's in a hard time. They've expended most of their monies trying to cure this and trying to treat this. And they're needing just a little bit extra help. So if you find it in you, please consider doing so. Like I said, there's a link down in the description below. You can find that. All right, moving on to other things. So you all are aware of this de-dollarization. I mean, it's happening. It's not happening necessarily at this rapid pace yet, where things just kind of are falling off the cliff and the dollar goes through some type of collapse, like was seen in Weimar Germany or Venezuela, or all these other countries that's happened in the past. But we are seeing a gradual decline. If you go back over the last 10-20 years, you can see where the dollar's global prominence has significantly lost its place. It used to be 60 to 70% of the world's transactions and trade was done in the US dollar. Now it's around 45%, but it's rapidly increasing. We're watching multiple countries around the world say, you know what, they're just kind of done with using the US dollar. They don't really want to be part of that system anymore. Part of that is because America has grown more and more to the point where they've weaponized the US dollar. Russia is a prime example right now that the sanctions that's been put on Russia are really through the US dollar. So if there's any type of transactions on trade that Russia might do that involve the US dollar, they're restricted from that. And so it puts a hurt on their country. But there's other countries that have experienced or potentially experiencing that. Uganda recently came out with some laws that was saying that, transgenderism, homosexuality, pedophilia, sex changes, things like that are considered criminal, and they're just not allowed. The United States, through Joe Biden, has hinted and suggested at sanctioning that country because they don't, we, not you and I, we as in the United States, does not agree with those policies that we're, the United States is pushing all this very woke agenda. And when they're seeing other countries go the opposite direction now, could it be that the US dollar will be weaponized to try to stop that or try to change their direction? I think that alone is going to cause a lot of nations to go the opposite way of the US dollar, because there are still many nations, whether they're right or wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that there are many nations out there that still are very morally traditional, and they will not, by any means, accept a lot of this woke agenda. And if that's going to be the new thing, that we use the US dollar to sanction them because we consider it a human rights issue that people can't, men can't dress up as women or something like that, then you're probably going to see even more nations walk away. We're also seeing the Middle East come together. For most of our lives, we've heard about this calling for peace in the Middle East. And a lot of people focus on the fact of the peace between the Middle Eastern nations and Israel. But honestly, the Middle Eastern nations themselves, not including Israel, rarely are at peace with each other also. There always something going on between them, that there's not a big consensus of relationship there. That's all rapidly changing. In the last 6 months or so, we have watched multiple countries throughout the Middle East that had virtually no or very poor relationships start to build bridges and come together. A lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it is because of China. China has become a very big negotiator of peace. They are going around the world trying to bring the world together, at least part of the world. Same way is going in Africa. Africa is working to become a more modern continent. A lot of the nations there are modernizing, and a lot of it's because, Africa is finding out they're wealthy in a way that a lot of other countries aren't. Just recently, in the last year or two, there's been something like $18 trillion in gold discovered in Africa. There's also been large deposits of other rare earth minerals discovered in Africa that are needed to build all this new technology. Same way with Afghanistan. A lot of people believe that what happened in Afghanistan with us leaving and then China moving in may have been on purpose, because now China has access to trillions of dollars in rare earth minerals that Afghanistan has. We're watching what would be considered the West, the G7, those 7 most powerful Western countries begin to lose prominence. You look at Europe. Europe is not doing too well economically, and really neither is the United States. And the world is watching the West just go into massive amounts of debt, and their whole economy and their whole currency systems are based on that. And I think the world is not liking that. And you look at countries like in Africa that, especially now, that are discovering more gold, and gold is actually a pretty prominent resource in several African countries. That if the whole world's currencies was based on gold, that would give them a very powerful play. They would be very wealthy, and yet under a debt-based currency system, they're very poor. I want you to watch this graph here. I'm going to play it. It's a little video, and it'll just play, and it shows the convergence and the inevitability of the BRICS nations, which is the Russia, China, India, South Africa, that's working on taking over the U.S. The U.S. dollar is the prominent, and the BRICS is the opposite of that. You all know that. They're meeting next month, and the word on the street is that by September, their new currency is going to be unveiled, and this new currency is going to be gold-backed. This is very significant. A gold-backed currency by nations that can together make up nearly as much power as the West. In fact, a lot of people keep saying that, well, China's economy just isn't what the United States' economy is. It's just not capable. It's not as big. That's true. But we're talking a difference between something like 18 trillion and 23 trillion. It's not a massive difference. And if you look at the amount that China's economy is growing versus the United States economy, it doesn't take too long to figure out that they will overtake us at the rate that it's going. And then you throw in all of these other countries, and you throw in the fact that China is controlling somewhere around 90% of the world's rare earth mineral resources, and then now having a large stake in a lot of the gold resources because of the relationships in Africa. The odds of this, the inevitability of the United States dollar not being prominent is becoming more and more real. This is probably, I think, a very good argument for folks at like the Fed and the U.S. Treasury to really push hard for the CBDC. In fact, that's probably one of the ways that they'll sell it with you. It'll be the only way that they can compete on a global market, is to have this central bank digital currency. And that's why we're going to see that happen probably a lot faster than you think. This month started the FedNow system, which is the building blocks. It's the foundation of that CBDC. So it won't be too hard or too much longer before we see that unveiled. I want to show you this news clip here from Russia Today. I know you're going to say it's Russia, it's slanted their way. Yeah, so is ours. It doesn't mean that there's not some truth nuggets in it. This is about a 2-minute video talking about the BRICS nations and the BRICS currency that's about to start. So go ahead and watch this for a couple of minutes, and I'll be right back.
The BRICS group is set to introduce a new currency backed by gold, in contrast to the credit-backed US dollar, with countries lining up to join the growing initiative.
The BRICS countries are planning to introduce a new trading currency which will be backed by gold. More and more countries recently expressed desire to join BRICS.
The decision comes a month ahead of scheduled Alliance Summit in Johannesburg, South Africa. 41 countries have since shown their interest in BRICS membership and its new currency implementation. Russia's foreign ministry has stated that if African states show enthusiasm, the group's expansion may also be on a Russia-Africa summit's agenda in the end of July. As of now, the BRICS group remains comprised of Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. Former Statistician General of South Africa, Pali Lehola, says the gold-backed currency will facilitate the advancement of developing countries.
Avoiding using the gold standard, we have gone for almost 45 years now, since 1980 when this was dropped. And we have seen the consequences, particularly of this to the developing countries, when the dollar was adopted as a standard and gold not as such. Yet against that, there's been accumulation of gold in the developing world. South Africa had a much stronger currency when the gold standard was still in force. By going the gold standard by many countries, that many African countries, of course, have, this will be of great benefit to strengthening the currency, the single currency that is backed by gold. It will facilitate development. Because after all, currency is the quantity of material things that societies have. If you use another currency based on material wealth or material things you don't have, it means that you are at the mercy of that country, and and they will charge commissions and the like.
Well, they seem to be very optimistic about it, to say the least. They say that there's been about 40 countries that have shown interest in applying. If you look at other sources, that there's a total of about 80 countries worldwide that have shown some level of interest of walking away from the US dollar, and have at least, at the very least, hinted that they would be interested in the BRICS currency. But there's at least 40 that are kind of making movements towards a BRICS currency and definitely walking away from the US dollar. That's pretty significant. We're talking, if you add up all of that, nearly half of the world is now saying, you know what, I really don't want to have anything to do with the US dollar. This is significant, folks. This is very significant. And what it means is that your money's not going to be worth as much. The buying power, one of the reasons why we can have cheap goods here in America, especially importing it, is because of the buying power of our dollar. When that goes away, all of this imported stuff's going to be really expensive for us. In fact, everything's going to be really expensive. We complain at times about how pricey things may be, but the reality is a lot of stuff is pretty cheap compared to the rest of the world, and it's because it's based on our currency. When that's taken away, it's going to make things a lot different for you and I. And then also this central bank digital currency, of course, we've talked about that at length. You know what the real dangers of that. They're going to control just about every aspect of your life. I mean, it will be absolutely the new slavery on this planet, this digital currency. You won't be able to do anything without the all-seeing eye of the government, and not only see what you're doing, but actually control, tell you what you can and cannot purchase. So when you look at all of this, and you see the other stuff we talk about on here, the war and the nuclear and all that kind of stuff that could be immediate, it may not be. Whether or not those things are immediate, this stuff is happening. This isn't a what if. This isn't a maybe. This isn't a could happen. It is happening, and it's happening a little at a time, but it is picking up pace. And at some point in the near future, I would say, we are going to start directly feeling the repercussions of this, and you need to be getting yourselves prepared for that. Stocking up, readjusting and reevaluating your personal finances, whether you need to be moving it into gold and silver or a gold and silver backed bank, or investing it in cryptos or something else, or just land and the resources and the things that you need to be prepared. Some of those things might be of interest to you, because if you don't, you could be losing a lot of wealth if you're just keeping your money in the bank. We've seen something like $500 billion in money withdrawn out of banks just since March. That's going to continue. In fact, Janet Yellen herself has said that they expect to see more bank failures in the coming months. Don't allow yourself to get caught up in it. Be prepared and be proactive. Work ahead of that and try to figure out a way to protect your family and your family's wealth. How little it may be, you still want to be prepared for that, and be prepared for the day that your cash is no longer accepted, and it's either survive on your own or with your community because you're self-sufficient, or take their digital money, which could very well lead to some kind of mark of the beast. It's time to get your houses in order, folks. You need to be preparing yourselves mentally, physically, and spiritually. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.